All right, I'd like to go ahead and call to order the Oregon Transportation Commission meeting for Friday, November 16th. Happy Friday, everyone. We are thrilled to be in Lebanon today, and what a beautiful facility. I really was thrilled to stay at the Best Western last night, a lovely property. It's been here for about 3 years, I understand, and this is a really nice facility. Thank you for hosting us. And Director Garrett, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I have 4 things I wish to share with the Commission and the good folks looking in. First, I want to welcome Cooper Brown. Cooper, could you stand up, please, sir? So I am pleased to formally introduce Cooper Brown, who is the Oregon Transportation Commission's first permanent Chief of Staff. In his role, he will lead the overall work of the Commission, including the important strategic tasks, as well as overseeing the day-to-day Commission operations and meetings such as we're at today. A little background on Cooper. Cooper is a former Marine who served as a platoon sergeant providing security at the American Embassy in Egypt. He also served in a number of key policy positions in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy within the Department of Defense. In these positions, he's worked with other agencies on complex policy issues such as threat reduction, issues surrounding Pakistan, and that small thing of international peacekeeping. I think that background positions him very well to take on the challenges of the Oregon Transportation Commission. Cooper is an undergrad with a degree from Portland State University, go Vikings, has a master's degree in peace and conflict studies from Notre Dame. Cooper will be new to the state of Oregon's government as well as ODOT, but he has already shown himself to be a very quick learner, and I am confident that he will be a great asset to the Commission and will ensure that we as an agency are positioned to deliver transportation policy and solutions for Oregon's future. Cooper, welcome, my friend. Madam Chair, I'd also like to take this time to offer thanks to Lynn Averback. Now, Lynn's not here, but I want to share my gratitude to Lynn for stepping into a role. It was a rotational assignment that Lynn engaged in over the last year. She was a steady hand at the wheel as we were developing the Chief of Staff position. She helped us through a time of significant evolution and change. Lynn helped us onboard 3 new commissioners, developed a work plan we will discuss today, maybe extending it out, updating the Commission's delegation orders, completed the DAS management review, work around Commission role and responsibilities. So to close this out, I want to thank Lynn for answering the call of duty. She did a job. She did it well done as well. Second issue, the Federal Transit Administration. Every 3 years, they perform what is called a state management review. They engaged ODOT to ensure we comply with federal requirements for the transit grants that we receive. This year, the review focused on ODOT compliance in 20 different areas. Overall, the review went well. The FTA team was pleased with ODOT's management of the FTA programs. They were especially impressed with our Oregon Public Transit Information Systems, OPTIS. Now, you will recall OPTIS is a comprehensive electric grant management system that facilitates the administration of federal and state grant programs managed by our ODOT Rail and Public Transit Division. The final report notes that there were no deficiencies found in 18 of the 20 areas. In the 2 areas, there were 2 minor deficiencies found that require corrective action. These corrective action plans will require the agency to first refine procedures for reporting future subaward and clarity on procedures to ensure that our Title VI and our ADA postings in the subrecipients buildings and websites are meeting all the protocols and priorities. The second area is to strengthen our procedures for monitoring subrecipient vehicles and facilities and maintenance activities. We expect, as a matter of fact, we have one of those issues already completed, but we expect the procedural refinements and the strengthening of some of these procedures to be completed well before a January 21st, 2019 deadline. So kudos to Hal Gard and his professionals over at Public Transit and Rail. The third issue, there's a new design coming forward for the Oregon driver's license and the ID card. DMV is implementing a full replacement of its driver's license issuing system. This includes new designs for the Oregon driver's license and ID cards. DMV will begin with a 3-month pilot in 2 Salem area offices in mid-December. Statewide deployment will follow in the March-April timeframe of 2019 at the remaining 58 offices across the state. We will fully vet the pilot and then take it out to those 58 statewide offices. The new card design will meet and at times exceed the national standards for securities that are embedded in that credential, as well as the durability of the card. You will use national standards for layout and content, which will help emergency responders find the information they need in times of crisis. Current cards will remain valid, and cardholders will not need to take any action to replace their cards. They'll do that at the time of expiration. DMV is engaging in aggressive outreach with the understanding that clear and timely communication is vital to prepare all the business partners, the stakeholders, who accept the Oregon driver's license and ID as an identifier for the upcoming changes, even though we are piloting, again, beginning in the 2 offices in Salem. So we'll be aggressive in our communications. Now, let me be clear. This is just about the new card design, not to be confused with the federal Real ID compliance cards. That option will be offered to Oregonians come July of 2020. So changes on top of the business practices and the business tools that we use with the Service Transformation Program. DMV continues to lean forward to move us into the future, to prepare us for the future. Madam Chair, the final item is an effort that has reached a major milestone, and I think we should acknowledge and celebrate that. It's specific to Barber Boulevard and an intergovernmental agreement that we've culminated excuse me, with the City of Portland. ODOT, and specifically Ryan Winsheimer and his Region 1 staff, have been active participants in the development of the Southwest Corridor Light Rail project for the past several years, and have been working very closely with the professionals at Metro and TriMet to develop a locally preferred alternative. Earlier this week, the Joint Policy Advisory Committee, or JPAC, recommended a locally preferred alternative that runs down Barber Boulevard. Now, Barber Boulevard just happens to be a state-owned highway. As part of the work specific to the preferred alternative, TriMet, Metro, the City of Portland, and ODOT made the determination that it would be appropriate to transfer Barber Boulevard to the City of Portland because it will now function more like a city street rather than a state highway, and it would allow more local design control associated with the implementation of that light rail project. The intergovernmental agreement for transfer was approved by the Portland City Council this past Wednesday, and was included in your supplemental package we spoke to a little bit earlier. It should be noted that the transfer only occurs when funding for the light rail project is secured, and there are efforts underway to do just that. This is a significant milestone, a culmination of years of hard work, collaboration, and negotiation. I congratulate Ryan, his team, and our regional partners in running through the tape on this important achievement. With that, Madam Chair, I'll stand down.
Thank you, Director Garrett. And jurisdictional transfers are not easy and without challenges, and so my kudos to the team as well. Welcome, Cooper, and I think your peacekeeping work will come in handy. And I also wanted to say thank you to Lynn and her great work, which helped carry us through this last year and a half, and get us to where we are today. So look forward to working with this new fully loaded team. Next, we have public comment, and I'd like to welcome Ms. Nassett to come and join us. And I only have one individual who has signed up to approach the commission. If anyone else would like to, please just raise your hand and we'll get you signed up as well. Wonderful to see you again. I know that you know the protocol, but go ahead and introduce yourself for the record, and then you have 3 minutes, and we are delighted to see you again.
Thank you very much, Chair. For the record, I am Sharon Nassett, and I am with Third Bridge now, and we have been working on a third project bridge for about 20 years now. And so I just handed you a package, and I wanted to briefly go over the first 2 parts of the package. And that would be this map of North Portland, and it has to do with the Columbia River Crossing Project and River Crossing 14, which was one of the primary alternatives. And under it, it just gives a little more information about it. And the Federal Register, which states that the alternatives, including highways and freeways, are to be thoroughly studied, including through construction. The next packet, and I did put this over here for people in the public if they'd like to follow later. This next package shows the primary impact area in Vancouver, and the red line is the impact that our project would have as a viaduct through that area. And they are talking about, as you know, 9 to 10 years of construction on I-5. This is the primary area, it's not secondary or third. Next one shows what will happen in Oregon on a highly urbanized freeway. And then the next one shows ours, which is vacant land adjacent to the railroad track. And as you know, environmental justice says whenever possible, you are to avoid doing damage. The last is this large piece of paper about the current bridge. And there's a picture of the bridge in it. And the RTP in both states, the Regional Transportation Plan in both states, Oregon and Washington, says preserve and maintain. Preserve and maintain. This, when you look at the highlighted parts, structurally sufficient, meets all requirements, no age restriction. It has had top ratings, it has personalized care. And what people seem to not understand is the bridge is made for in perpetuity. Each of the parts were made so that every 40 to 60 years, you take them out and you put in new parts and the bridge continues on. As you know, the bridge has no weight restrictions. They have not ever been able to find, they don't have any rust on it, and it's been painted. It is also historical value. This corridor is over capacity. Right now, we spend about $1.5 million on maintenance and operations every year. And every 40 to 60 years, according to this document, which lays out the costs of each of the parts, is about $40 million for 40 to 60 years. That comes down to, when you have 135 to 150 vehicles on each bridge each day, less than 10 cents a vehicle that crosses the bridge. The importance of the bridge is stated as being, the value is $500 million to $1 billion. And that doesn't take into account any of its historical values or all of the others attached. The last thing I'd like to say, and I know I'm a little over time, is about the lift. On here, it says the lift's capability is for national and international travel, ocean. And the bridges between there and the river, or the ocean, have always been that way. Right now, it's 179. If a new bridge goes in, unless it is Baskel, which they are doing on freeways, the Wilson Bridge is, then it is going to not have the shipping capacity it does now. It won't meet current river standard, which is why the Coast Guard has given us a limited permit, and it won't reach ocean going. If it is 95, 110, or 116. And right now it's 179. It will be the lowest one on the channel. So I will leave because I know my time is up, but I would like to make appointments and talk with you about this. And preservation and maintenance, a dime, less than a dime. Grazie.
Thank you very much for approaching us again. Wonderful to see you, and thank you for these materials. As you know, that this discussion is starting to happen again, and so I very much appreciate your continued involvement and for keeping us informed about this opportunity. And yes, you are welcome to make appointments with us and would love to hear more.
Thank you very,
Yes,
very much. I
thank you.
appreciate it.
Do we have anyone else that would like to approach the commission? Okay. So next we will go on to item C and hear about a concept that is happening in the Portland area, and this is the Frog Ferry project. Please. Ms. Bladham, shall I turn it over to you? Okay, and go ahead and hit the button and one of them. There you are, yes.
There we are.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a true honor to be here with all of you today. I am especially privileged to be here with Dan Yates, the president of the Portland Spirit, and also Chris Ford, who is the investment project manager for Metro, the Regional Council of Governments in the Portland area. Today we have a brief PowerPoint to socialize you on the concept of looking into bringing a passenger ferry service into the Portland metropolitan area. Our goal is to create a safe, and safety will come first, sustainable in all ways that we define sustainable, river-friendly passenger ferry service to better connect people to the river and help alleviate traffic congestion in the Portland metropolitan area. Our objectives: customer satisfaction, of course, a public-private partnership, and that is based on what we're learning from passenger ferry consultants. We have HMS Consultancy based out of Seattle. They're a global operation, and as they see startups around the world, that truly is the best practice. Our need to connect people to the river. We often have viewed from a transit planning perspective the river as an obstacle. It's something to get around or over rather than something to embrace. And really, when we look at our heritage as a river city, we were founded at the confluence of two rivers for a reason. And a culture shift. There's no doubt getting people to think about how they navigate around our area a little bit differently is a change agent kind of move. In terms of inspiration, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I got my start with what is now the state economic development agency called Business Oregon. I was there for 10 years. I've served under 5 governors, conducting special projects. I was the co-founder and first ride director for Cycle Oregon, starting 32 years ago, if you can believe it. So in terms of change agent type initiatives, back then, our rural communities in particular weren't really excited about having a bunch of cyclists come into their communities, including Lebanon here, and I have fond memories of coming through here and Sweet Home and some of the most beautiful days in the heritage of Cycle Oregon. Another point of inspiration truly are the aerial views, and I am a student pilot, have been for about 10 years now, and I've spent many, many trips flying up and over from Aurora Airport, up and over the Willamette and the Columbia Rivers, to the Puget Sound area, up to Vancouver and the San Juans, and to see the passenger ferry services up there. I also recently served as chair for a college reunion, and my vice chair lived on Bainbridge. And all of our meetings were scheduled around the ferry schedule. And so just looking from a culture perspective, truly river cities do embrace their ferry system. The story about our native heritage and the founding on the river is particularly important to me, and it's difficult to see in this slide, but in the upper right-hand corner you'll see the image of Frog. And in the Chinookan mythology, Frog was considered very good fortune and taught the local people how to fish by weaving together nettles collected from the riverbanks. And so frogs are considered very good fortune. In my 10 years with the Port of Portland, I actually got to work with 2 Chinookan artists, Tony Johnson and Adam McIsaac, who created that artwork. And Tony is now the chairman of the Chinookan tribe. And so part of my personal vision for this is us embracing that native heritage and telling the story of Shwai Cake, which is Chinookan for frog, and those native communities that would have been located up and down the Columbia and Willamette rivers. And then for points of inspiration are certainly ferry experts. I'm not a maritime expert. I spent the first 6 months of the 18 months we've been working on this apologizing for that. But I've reached out to a number of people who candidly are experts, much smarter than I am about it, and one of them here is Dan Yates. So would you impart your wisdom?
Hi, I'm Dan Yates. I am the owner of the Portland Spirit River Cruises. We operate 5 vessels, do about 2,000 cruises a year. We operate from the Snake River, Columbia River, and obviously the Willamette. We cruise all the way from Astoria out to Lewiston in Tri-Cities in obviously Portland. We operate the Sternwheeler Columbia Gorge for the Port of Cascade Locks. Been doing it for 25 years here in Portland. Prior to that, I was a naval officer and also worked for the largest dinner boat company in the world for a few years. I have been frustrated with the lack of activity on the Willamette and the Columbia River for the entire time that I've been here. And it is an incredibly underutilized resource. And it's been refreshing to see various government agencies starting to come around and realizing that the Willamette River is more than just a static display. And I'm excited about the concept that's getting more and more traction of river transportation. But I want to warn you, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and especially like the 2006 study, which the city of Portland did, was about a taxi service, not a ferry service. Very different concept. The ferry service, technology has advanced incredibly quickly in the world. In the United States, we have over 600 ferry operations. Half of them are privately owned. Some of them all the way back to the 1700s, especially on the East Coast. But and about half of them are either publicly owned and operator or a public-private partnership. And I'm very excited that it looks like we may actually break through the logjam and get more activity on the river, and also provide more resiliency for the community about when and if the big earthquake ever does happen. We'll have more vessels to move people around when all the bridges come crumbling down for a while. So I hope that you view the ferry not based upon 25 year ago technology, but of current technology, and I hope that we can get a study funded to actually bear this out.
Thank you, Dan. I would challenge you to find anyone in the region that knows our rivers as well as Mr. Yates here. So I appreciate very much your being here today.
Sure.
We get it. This is a big, bold, audacious, challenging project. It's a big change agent initiative. It's going to take an enormous amount of courage behind it. At this point, I have over 450 supporters behind us. You have letters of support. I just had additional letters that came in from Greenbrier and the Port of Vancouver last night. I'm expecting one from Burgerville today. We had, for the Regional Transportation Plan, open testimony through Metro. It was somewhere between 100 and 130 letters of testimony that added us into that. And so in just a moment, Chris is going to be speaking about Metro's role. For this project, rather than saying it's too hard or it's too expensive, let's be informed, let's be curious, let's not say we simply can't do it. And I need to confirm it, but I do have from someone else that has tried this effort before, who has said of the top 80 river cities in the world, every single one of them has some sort of water service to move passengers. We are woefully lagging behind. This is going to take collective vision. I do think together we're smart enough to make it happen. This isn't a novel concept. It's just not. We're just playing catch up here. You all know better than anyone about the growth in traffic congestion and how it is severely impeding our quality of life. This is time for a new mode of transportation to be introduced. The routes that we're proposing, and these are approximations because everybody wants to know what the boat is, everybody wants to know what the route is, everybody wants to know the travel time. And part of why we're here today is we're going to be talking about some feasibility studies to help us get a little bit smarter so we can be operating with facts and data. But to get us started, Vancouver to Portland, we are very much in support of a bi-state bridge. This is not an either or. This is a piece of the puzzle. But really the heavy lift is initiating and bringing in the infrastructure and change the culture. Just like cycling. Now we've got cyclists all over the place. And believe it or not, back then, our shoulders weren't all that wide, and they weren't very clean, and we didn't have infrastructure for cyclists. And believe it or not, infrastructure was needed. So Vancouver to Portland. So the Port of Vancouver's behind us on it, be their Terminal 1, which is immediately adjacent west, the I-5 bridge, just before the big Grammar development. So we'll be going before their commission as well, but again, we have their support. And at this point, the approximation is to Salmon Springs Fountain, which is in downtown Portland. It's actually where Dan ties up for the Portland Spirit. Approximately 8 stops up and down the Willamette River. I don't feel very precious about saying this has to be the stop. We really need to have the modeling done and to find out where the demand is to make sure there's a viable business model for all of these routes. I've heard from the St. John's neighborhood. I've heard from developers in the Pearl and in Northwest Portland. Swan Island, Daimler, and Vigor are 2 of our biggest supporters. They've offered to design, build a dock for this effort. They have so many employees that are hung up trying to commute in from Vancouver. The Oregon Convention Center currently has a Duckworth dock. Salmon Springs we mentioned. OMSI, I've met with Gertie Edelin as they're working on the master plan. Both OHSU and Zidell's are behind this effort. Zidell's have actually committed funding. Lake Oswego, I have just had some very tenuous, not tenuous, I would say superficial conversations with them. Milwaukee and Oregon City. I just presented to the Council of Westland a couple nights ago because they're already saying, we open up these locks, we want to make sure that we're a port of call. And then for the 3.0 version, I have, in terms of the gorge, I've heard from Travel Oregon, who supports us, saying we currently are working with TriMet to bus 50,000 hikers up the gorge in the summer. Camas to Troutdale, TriMet has an interest in that. Port of St. Helens, I've heard from. Downtown Portland to PDX. Sure, we could do all of that and then bus them over. So this is an approximation of this ferry service at 22 knots from Port of Vancouver to downtown Portland. So that's against the current at approximately 38 minutes. The equipment. Again, this is an approximation. This is a vessel that's currently serving on the Potomac. This is 2 decks. There is a concern that the fact that we have a steel bridge has a very low clearance, much like Brisbane and Sydney. So maybe our boat would end up with 1 deck, but the air draft, which is really the distance from the surface of the water to where your clearance, will need to be really very low. And so that's something we're certainly aware of. In terms of the target audience, first and foremost would be commuters. So looking at Vancouver to Portland commuters, and if you look at the simple math across the bottom of the screen, we're looking at a 149 passenger ferry, and that's somewhat based on regulatory requirements because you go 150 and on up and it puts you in a different category. So roughly 150 passengers plus storage for bikes. That equates to 500 cars. That is based on the Columbia River Crossing research, that 67% of all those vehicles are single occupancy commuters coming in the morning and returning in the evening. That removes approximately 3.5 miles of I-5 congestion. It's a start. But the point of having a ferry service is it's scalable. This is incredibly modular. And when I was down meeting with the senior planners for the San Francisco ferry system last week, or last month, they were saying, that's the beauty of this. If you don't have the demand, you don't have those port of calls. You're not having to rip up roadways and rails to replan. You know, really you have the confines of the river, but other than that, it's based on demand. That second target audience would be locals crossing the river, so east-west during the day, doctor's appointments, different meetings, lunches. The third market would be visitors. Travel Oregon and Travel Portland are 2 of our biggest supporters. Travel Oregon has committed some funding for our feasibility studies, and then emergency response. And I just recently left my job to pursue this full-time. I've been with a global helicopter company called Erickson Incorporated, which specializes in emergency response, among others. We are woefully underplanned in terms of emergency response, particularly in the event of a major earthquake. Supporters and stakeholders, this gives you a smattering of the folks we've reached out to. At this point, we've met with more than 150 individuals to try to get a little bit smarter about it, public and private sector. I want to thank Travis Brower here, your deputy, and Matt Garrett. Both of them, when I asked to meet with them and to get a little bit smarter about it, immediately responded and sat down with us. And I really appreciate that courtesy and than the introductions that Matthew went on to make with the Washington State leadership. For ODOT alone, I have met with over now 15 staffers here. I have met with the elected leadership that serve on your committee. And one of the things we're really going to be looking for is the support of ODOT from a staffing perspective of how to navigate through the proper channels. And as I mentioned earlier, Chris Ford is here from Metro, and so he's going to say a few words about their involvement.
Hi, I'm Chris Ford, Investment Areas Project Manager for Metro. I'm the Southwest Corridor Project Manager for them as well, and thank you to ODOT for all of your efforts in the 99W jurisdictional transfer. And so Metro Council yesterday, after JPAC, actually did approve the preferred alternative for Southwest Corridor to be in the RTP. Right there, yes. And so it will be all done within a decade. So as our region grows, we all need to pursue options, all the options on the table to help people move efficiently through the greater Portland area. It's a growing area, and we need ways that move people that don't create more greenhouse gas emissions or degrade our quality of air. There's an idea, this is an idea the region has looked at a little bit various times over the last 20 years. There's a lot of unanswered questions, so we, Metro, are encouraged to see the private sector exploring climate-friendly transportation options that recognize a sense of place. The Metro Council hasn't officially discussed or taken a position on the project. However, the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan includes the concept of the Frog Ferry. It's not a commitment by the region to move forward with the ferry, but it is a hall pass to approve the project for further study. And if there's an entity that's willing to manage and secure funds for such a study, we'd be very supportive of that.
Great. Thank you. Timeline and deliverables. So this is really our focus right now. We have provided a concept plan behind this. We have developed a business plan. There is a website out there, just frogferry.com, which has a value of approximately $250,000 conservatively that's been delivered pro bono. In terms of the deliverables, you'll see there on that left hand, there are 5 different studies: a transit modeling study, economic and social impact study, it's really the triple bottom line, passenger ferry service case studies, operational infrastructure report, and funding strategies. All of those would then be conducted by, you can see the consultants under the leads that we have allocated to put on those. And in a year's time, we would coalesce all of the findings from those feasibility studies, roll that into an operational plan, and map it then to a financial plan. So that is that 2020 across the bottom at 7 o'clock where it says finance plan. At that point, as you just look down that list, that would include an infrastructure development plan, startup costs, operational costs, a pricing model. We get to go, no-go decision. And that's likely in the summer of 2020 if everyone comes together and plays well together. At that point, if we do have a go decision, it would be an entity like PBOT that would issue an RFP for an operator. So that is based on the Portland streetcar model that we have today, which the city of Portland is comfortable with and likes that model. It's a good one for this. And Dan Bauer, who's executive director for the Portland streetcar, is on our newly formed board that just met for the first time Wednesday under our 501c3 status. So the total request, all in, not that just won't be the state and various entities, is 1.3 million. So incredibly modest, and much of that is due to those lead consultants coming in pro bono. Frog Ferry team, we have 5 different teams behind this. To date, all of these individuals have been pro bono. This is in addition to the 450 supporters. And just with the word getting out in the news in this last week, we've had about 100 people that have signed up on our listserv. So you get a sense, the operations team, those are maritime experts, the anchor or government and public affairs team, our power engineering team really looking at the greening. Dan Yates is on there. Dan could have been up there on all 5 of the lists. Our financial team, and then pro bono service providers. How is this different from other temps is one of the best questions I get, and particularly referring back to that 2006 Metro study that Dan referred to. One, if you go back to the final pages on the summary, there are 5 different requirements that would need to be met. One of them is talking about you have to have population growth that exceeds, I think it's at 10% growth. Well, we far exceeded this now 12, 13 years later. When you look at congestion levels and competing for time and costs, check the box on that. You need to have improved technology to ensure we have minimal wake, to meet the wake requirements and minimize impact to the riverbank. We have that, a huge movement of greening in the ferry industry. Looking at dock facilities and access. We still have some work that needs to be done there, and we need to do the discovery on that. But there are more docks than there were going back during that time. And then lastly, this is on the finding of chapter 5.3 in there. We will be reliant on local champions for this to move it forward, and I really believe that we have that in spades. So today
Can I interrupt
yes,
for just
go
a
ahead.
second? I've been working on this for about 20 years. I've been to ferry conferences, I've ridden a lot of ferries around the country and the world. And I have been discouraged because there's so many levels of government that have to be involved in this that everybody's looking for somebody else to take the lead. I'm willing to put out there that I'm willing to buy the first boat. But you guys have to do the study. I'm not going to pay a few $100,000 for a study that will just roll around and collect dust because government can't get its act together to actually raise $4 or $5 million to buy the boat to start the process. That is what has scared the hell out of me, is I have been involved in politics in this state for 25 years, and it is very frustrating at the speed that things go, or don't go. And I want to remove the end game problem that I'm willing to stick out there and make this happen, but you guys have to actually put some skin in the game and have and support it. So let's remove that element about, oh, let's not spend the money because no one's really going to step up and do this.
Thank you. I didn't know he was going to say that. I'm a little shocked. So thank you, Dan. Now I get to ride back with you. I know you're not. I know you're not. But it really does. It does speak to our final quote here. I didn't grow up saying someday I want to coordinate a passenger ferry service. I have had now nearly 32 years in transportation infrastructure planning. I do think we're smarter than this. I am a native Oregonian. I don't have any expertise in the housing issue. I don't have any expertise in the homeless issue. I do know a little bit about big watershed changes of culture. I do believe in us as Oregonians. I do believe in us as people that love our waterways. And so I'm feeling like this group that you can't see, but these 450 of us that are here today backing this effort, we're doing our part. And to Dan's point, we are asking all civic agencies to step up and help us. This is such a low ask, and we know your staff is really tapped. But to provide us with some help as we're going into Salem, to look at your current discretionary fund. I'm learning about all these different funds from all of these ODOT staffers I've been meeting with, and the grant programs and all, but we need a little hand-holding and guidance here. And so I appreciate your consideration. I appreciate your leadership very, very much. This is such an important board and organization. We've worked for a year to get here today, and I appreciate your consideration, so thank you.
I am just floored by the passion behind it as well. And thank you for having been the last 12 years in local government. It is not even glacial in some respects. And so I appreciate your candor, and you know, your commitment to this project and to this concept is to be commended. I do know that in a lot of other areas, this is something that is used, and it's just, you couldn't imagine not having it. And so very much appreciate that you're bringing this forward. So how is this type of service usually funded in terms of sustainability? Is it subsidized? Is there a model out there that you would just say, boy, that's the true north? If we got to that, that'd be great. And my point of reference is transit, so I have no point of reference other than that. So,
Well, very, very good question. So there are a couple different questions in there, and I'll try to make it very quick. One of the feasibility studies is looking at like case studies around the world. So we would be taking a look at Australia from an operational model and looking at the really low bridge clearance and for commuters there as well. We'd be taking a look at San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco was formed 1999. The mayor said, we're going to put together a blue ribbon task force. It took 3 years. It was so political just to form the task force. And they're saying, look what you've been able to do. 6 months you put together your task force. You've got the right people here, and particularly for commuters. The model's different. It's open water. Washington State Ferry System we're very familiar with. It's a different model, and it's for cars, and there's a fuel tax. Looking at King County or Kitsap County ferries, there's some similarities there. Even looking at what's going on in the Potomac, a lot of sightseeing, but also for commuters in terms of putting it in, and on the Hudson. So we'd be drawing all of that, and then for that finance plan, yeah, it would be subsidy, and we'd be tapping in on the federal side, likely. I mean, we'll see. And Dan, it sounds like, has some thoughts on it. But there are FTA funds right now that are funding largely Alaska, Washington, and California are the states that are getting, and New York, the biggest pieces of the
Can I
pie.
jump in? Bluntly, the ferry system would have to be integrated into the TriMet system. We would have the best ferry systems in the world. I was just in Helsinki. The bus pass, the tram pass, which they call streetcar tram, and the ferries are all one integrated ticket. And they're operated by different agencies, but they actually cooperate and get along. And so ideally, you would have the streetcar, the light rail, buses, and ferry all under the same fare structure. But you definitely want, much like the streetcar is not operated by TriMet, it's operated by for cost control containment. You want the public-private partnership so that you can have it privately operated for cost containment, but you want it a public partnership to qualify for federal funding. There's $300 million every year available for ferry funding, and it's only for infrastructure or ferries. It cannot go for operating costs. And so it is allocated out. Clackamas County got their ferry replaced for free from the federal government. The Westport ferry, when it's due for replacement, will be paid for out of those ferry funds. And they're distributed proportionally, mostly to Washington and New York and Alaska. San Francisco actually has their own ferry funding program, which they don't tap into the feds much. But there is money allocated to every state. And we have very seldom, we've only approached it one time in the last 20 years. So there is an argument that can be made that the first, and now we're only initially talking one ferry. I actually have 16 ferries is what I could envision carrying thousands and thousands of people north-south from Lake Oswego to Portland and from Vancouver to down to Portland. And you put a variety of service in there from direct service to locals. I mean, you run it like a transit system. But we got to get the first one in to prove to you all that it actually works. And it would be also subsidized, much like light rail is subsidized and buses are subsidized, because you can't make it outrageously expensive, because the purpose is to get people out of their cars. So we don't have to build another $2 billion bridge. Maybe a newer bridge, but not a...
Thank you, that's
Sure.
helpful. I appreciate the additional candor, too. So do we have other questions, or please, go right ahead.
Do you have some? Okay. Great, thanks for the update, Susan. Obviously,
Sure.
we've been talking about this for a while, and I think it's a very realistic and practical concept, and it's kind of sad that it's gotten this far down the line and we haven't even invested or engaged in any further conversations. And I think at the workshop, last in the workshop, I was talking about how I was privy to a Central City concept plan that was back in the 90s, which is a long time ago, talking about the water taxi concept and how we're talking about it again, almost 30 years later. And that's a little sad, but, you know, the point is that we're talking about and we're trying to find ways to minimize the impacts that our highway system is facing right now and minimize congestion and obviously the environmental impacts as a result of that increased congestion. But I had a couple questions related to this. You had indicated earlier, let me find the page, that there were about 500 passengers or cars that would be off the road or something to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
Was that an analysis that was done on those cars that are actually going downtown? Or is that just an overall assessment on just, this is what we guess how many cars would be off the road?
That was an assessment. I talked with a couple different transportation experts, and just looking at that number of cars equates to roughly 3.5 miles. And there was more rigor to that, and it was based on the number of cars like per commuter mile, but I just felt like I was getting pretty technical, but that's something that we've had discussions with Metro about as well. Yeah. So it's a start, it's an approximation.
Got it, okay.
And I'd like to just iterate, that's for one boat.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
So-
get that, but I'm trying to ensure that if we're using data points, that we're not using data points that aren't adequate, because if we're talking about going from Vancouver to downtown, the narrative would be around how many cars are taken off the road that are people, that the trips that are starting in Vancouver and ending in downtown.
Right.
Well, we know we have 55,000 commuters on a daily basis jamming up I-5. So that's kind of, but again, that's why a study needs to be done by professional ferry and transit engineers to understand what is the viable maximum ability of moving people off of the road onto. And I don't think anybody here is that person.
Well, actually, it will be Metro. So that is taking the point of origination and destination. That's part of the feasibility study then that Metro would be working with us to conduct. So we've had those early conversations. I've met with Doug Kelsey and the leadership at TriMet as well. They're very curious about that as well. So there's quite a bit of data that's already out there, Orlando, because of the Columbia River crossing, but we are gathering what kind of the requirements are from those agencies to make sure, again, we're operating with facts and data to make sure we satisfy that question.
Great.
So we hear you clearly.
Sorry,
I should just clarify that, as I mentioned before, a Metro Council hasn't yet discussed our role in the project, and so, of course, including in the RTP is a great step, and it includes making sure that state and federal funding are eligible for studies and figuring this out. And so what that next step is and what the potential role of Metro is would still to be determined.
And then one last thing, given your Metro's new incoming president and her focus around innovative modes and whatnot, and most importantly, something here that I think is really vital, as you had indicated, success will be relying on local champions. I'm gonna pivot to the process we're kind of still in the process of, related to congestion pricing and the broad outreach in terms of stakeholders that were engaged in that process. When I looked at your list, whether it's your board or the folks that you've had letter supports from, I don't see a lot of representation from the environmental justice community. And I think that's something that you're gonna have to figure out how you tap into those constituent bases, whether it's on the Oregon side or even Washington side, because that's gonna be very vital as it relates to some people, maybe single parents who are working on the Clark County side that work downtown, you know, that are going to depend on a service like this, as opposed to wasting a lot of time sitting in congestion. So other than that, and like I said, I mean, as it relates to your incoming president, I would assume that that's something that she's gonna be pretty interested in, as it relates to her vision for the future of the metro region. But other than that, I mean, this, like I said, this is a great concept. It's sad that I was in 5th grade the last time this was even originated or talked about. And I think as long as we get the ball rolling on it, hopefully we can get some things implemented and some innovative concepts around how we move people around this the metro region. So
Great.
Good work.
Thank you.
So we are running a little short on time, so I know we have a couple questions, and then we will probably need to follow up after. So please, Commissioner Callery.
Just one question. Dan, with your background, Dan, with your background on the river, and both rivers actually, the operational costs are always a challenge because, as you said, you don't get money for operations. So I know that you have a fleet of vessels. How does that equate to maintaining a vessel like this?
Well, that's it. I'll tell you what, you give me the same subsidy as light rail gets per passenger, and I might be able to kick back 15% or 25%.
I can't give you any subsidy, but.
No, I'm just saying, from an operational standpoint, there is, one of the great leaps in technology has been electric.
Yeah.
And not only from an environmental standpoint, but not burning fossil fuels, it is, the cost per mile traveled is dropping dramatically. The initial cost up front is higher, but it gets the subsidy down to closer to what a bus passenger is being on the fare box ratio, instead of the 7 or 8 times what it is for light rail. I mean, we don't hesitate to expand the light rail, knowing that, you know, we are increasing the subsidy dramatically. And we see that as an employer, my payroll tax going up routinely. No one really worries about that because the employer is paying for it. But I think that ferries being in between the two costs per passenger traveled, and that's a very fair thing to say, that's another reason why it needs to be integrated into the system.
Well, I recently had an opportunity to see passenger ferry type operations in both Amsterdam and Porto, Portugal. And they had a couple that were totally solar powered.
Yep.
So
Europe is much way ahead of us on ferry technology.
So I just want to quickly thank you all for coming. I have met with Susan in the past, and I appreciate those briefings on this subject and all of your work on it. And you've really been tireless and perseverant through already through a long period of time. I want to make one point and then ask a question. So the point I need to get out on the record is that my wife, Sue Van Brocklin, is one of your pro bono service providers. And our family doesn't have any financial investment in this, nor is Sue or her firm being compensated. As you said, these people are all pro bono. So I don't think that rises to a potential conflict of interest under the Oregon ethics rules, but if someone were to view that question differently, I'll just declare a potential conflict of interest on the record to make that clear that we've identified it. I don't believe it will influence my thinking as a member of the Oregon Transportation Commission on what ODOT's involvement should be, or what other governmental investment should be, or what private investments should occur. So, and that's my disclaimer. So my question, I think, is really probably to the director or maybe the deputy director, which is, could you just inform us on the commission what, just initially, what kinds of funding routes might be available on this to go to a funding, to participate in funding if we were to participate. And I'll just, before you answer, just say that we are clearly in a time where more than ever we need to be focused on a comprehensive multimodal approach to transportation. That is clear around the state, in small communities, in rural counties, in smaller cities, and is certainly true in the Portland metropolitan area. And so I'm very interested in this as part of the bouquet of potential elements of that bouquet of service providers to address what is a increasingly challenging problem throughout the state, particularly in the Portland metro area, and what appears to me, and I believe everyone on our commission, to be a growing area of concern and demand, and we are going to have to be creative and think about doing things that we've not had to do in the past in order to meaningfully address the congestion of today and the congestion that's coming, and to serve the state properly in terms of ensuring the citizens of Oregon have the transportation network they need to flourish going forward. So with that, I'll turn to the director and let him answer my question.
I think, Commissioner Brockman, I think it was mentioned several times. I think a pathway to work with our partners probably takes us into the world of transit. I think that communications and engagement at the state level and maybe the federal level offers some opportunities. So there's where we would probe to sync things up, and to the earlier conversation. How do you weave this into a seamless system?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the update and for your passion and for joining us today. More to come.
Thank you.
Yes. I do recognize that we are running a little bit behind. I suspect that we will catch up. If not, we will around the noon hour. Next, we will have an update on the House Bill 2017. Ms. Silva.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Kat Silva, House Bill 2017 Implementation Project Manager for ODOT, and here to present to you your monthly status update. I will kind of just give an overview of the highlights, implementation highlights for this month, and then open it up to any questions that you may have for me. So this month we have Connect Oregon, the program modifications RAC will have their third meeting on the 22nd, which is this coming Monday. The Safe Routes to Schools first round infrastructure grant application window closed on the 1st of November, and we received 112 entities submitting applications requesting $85 million, and that was a $16 million pot, if you remember. So there's definitely a lot of need out there, and staff are kind of actively doing their reviews at this point in time.
Well, and that, I would just, maybe we capture that for the investment strategy conversation too. So 85 million of a request, and we have 16 to allocate. So just bookmarking that.
Yeah. The STIF Formula Fund Round 1 application period closed for submission of STIF plans from transit service providers, and we received 19 in that first cycle, which was 3 less than we originally reported, I think, in August. Our anticipation was that we would get 22, but I know that staff are working closely with each one of the entities to make sure that they're coming through at the right time and the right round so that they're successful. Let's see. And then lastly, there are 2 jurisdictional transfers on this consent calendar that are House Bill 2017 jurisdictional transfers, so we're slowly chipping away at the 7 that were named in the bill. Next month, you will hear the final, or you will see and review the final application, draft application to FHWA under the Value Pricing Initiative. And what I can tell you about that is that closes out kind of the first phase of implementation, and then we'll pivot to what will look like a new implementation plan for the second phase, which is the setup, everything that comes after submission of the application, and ties to the kind of the statutory requirements in the bill. And then we'll also hear, or you'll also get to see the updated draft work plan for your review and approval next month, and you'll get a test drive on the Transparency, Accountability, and Performance website. It is to go live January 1, 2019, so you'll get a chance to see that. And as a component of that, it touches on the other initiative, which is the local reporting of bridge and pavement conditions. So the part of the TAP website is the portal for local governments to report in to our agency, which will then kind of feed into a report that you all will submit to the Joint Committee on kind of the statewide look of all that information aggregated once we have it submitted to us. You will not be seeing me next month because the timing of the meetings is so close. So the next time that I will be in front of you is January, at which point we'll kind of do the year in review and all of the House Bill 2017 accomplishments in the year of 2018, and then also looking forward to what's to come in 2019. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
I noted that everything is in green, which
Yes.
is wonderful.
Yes.
Is there anything that's keeping you up at night?
At this point, I would say no, nothing that's keeping me up at night, because we are really closely tracking the implementation risks. And we are, as part of that, when the implementation leads are reporting in about any of the risks, they also have to submit what their mitigation strategy is or what their plan is for getting a mitigation strategy. And so as long as we are continuing to do that and we're kind of tackling these risks head on and issues head on before they become risks, I think we're in a good position at this point.
Thank you for your great work. The House Bill 2017 is a historic funding opportunity for the state of Oregon, and making sure that we are accountable and transparent in that work and making sure that we're tracking appropriately. It's your great work that is keeping us focused and on task. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kat.
Next, we will receive an informational update about the work of South Valley Mid-Coast Regional Solutions teams. And we'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you. Wonderful to see you. Trying not to. You good?
Oh, thank you. And it's forward and backward? Okay. And do I point it anywhere specifically? Right there.
Ms. Michalonis, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome, Chair Boehne and members of the commission, the committee. I think it's been 2 years since you've been to the South Valley Mid-Coast Regional Solutions region, but I'm assuming that you've had other meetings in other regions and kind of know the overview of the problem-solving opportunity emphasis of regional solutions in the governor's office. So I won't go over that. I did bring a map that I didn't have on the screen, but we take that map wherever we go so you can see the 11 regions in the state, and you are in the South Valley Mid-Coast. So that's Linn, Benton, Lincoln counties, and Lane County. So we have a 4-county region, and we're in Linn County today, as you know. I'd also like to introduce today and welcome, and very happy that he could attend with me, the Director of Development for Linn Benton Community College, and that's John McArdle. And John is here and an important member of our team. I'm sorry to say that our ODOT liaison, Jay Pudwell, is under the weather and couldn't attend with us today. Usually what Regional Solutions does is give you an update of some of the projects and initiatives that we're working on, and I think you have those in your memo. You'll see an update on the Oregon RAIN project, which is an acronym for the Regional Acceleration Innovation Network. And for those of you that I talked with in Eugene Springfield a couple of years ago, we talked about how entrepreneurial ecosystem is a very important priority along with transportation in our region. And this is an initiative that enhances the ecosystem for entrepreneurs and startup businesses. And so there's an update in there. There's also an update on the Mid-Willamette Valley Intermodal Facility, or the Transload Facility, which was part of the funding for the House Bill 2017 for transportation. We're very excited about the development of one of those facilities in our region, and as you know, the other one will be in Eastern Oregon. Along with that, we're supporting efforts to build a robust training program and awareness program for our robust maritime workforce in all of the state of Oregon. It's extremely significant in our region, and we're going forward with that. And water planning is extremely significant. In 2015, the legislation passed to support 4 pilot projects for what they call place-based water planning. 3 of the place-based water planning efforts are going on the east side of the state, and one of them we're lucky to have at the coast in the Mid-Coast region. And so that's a multi-year effort, and you'll see an update in your memo about that as well. along with a workforce housing initiative that is critical throughout the state since housing is in crisis. So before I highlight the asset that we want to show you here in Lebanon, I wanted to give you a quick update just in terms of numbers, and I can hand those out to you later or talk about them further. This Regional Acceleration Innovation Network was an initiative that was started years ago during the Kitzhaber era to collaboratively bring our region together to really enhance startup businesses that were bringing in revenue from other parts of the country or the world. And this creates a system of business accelerators, business mentors, and capital investment to help these companies start here, be successful here, and then grow here and stay here. And I just wanted to let you know that 115 companies have gone through the accelerators, over 1,000 companies have been assisted, and they've generated about $23 million in revenue, which is very exciting since inception. Also, what's extremely significant is there has been about $30 million invested in these companies. And when we first started out, there's a scan that takes place about every 2 years, sponsored by the University of Oregon and some of the nonprofits in the state, to look and see where capital investment and venture capital is invested in Oregon. And the Lynn, Benton, Lincoln, Lane areas was a capital investment desert. And just to have the $30 million invested in these companies plus more, plus there are funds now set up with many more millions in seed money for these businesses that are growing here. So it's been a great entrepreneurial effort, and we're really happy for it in terms of economic development. We're now trying to spread that RAIN effort throughout the rest of the state, both in urban and in rural areas, which are extremely significant for economic growth in our state. But today, since we're in Lebanon, we want to focus on one of our largest economic drivers and assets in this region that's tied directly to our transportation priority and the governor's future-ready workforce agenda. And as you probably know, in our four-county region, we have 3 community colleges. One is the Oregon Coast Community College, Lane Community College, and then here we have Lynn Benton Community College, and John is here representing Lynn Benton. All 3 presidents of those community colleges have traditionally sat on our advisory committee, and I want to thank Dr. Greg Hammond for doing that for Lynn Benton Community College and giving us his time. The asset that we have for Lynn Benton Community College that we wanted to highlight is right here in Lebanon, and that is LBCC's Advanced Transportation Technology Center, which is housed in their brand new, and you can see a picture of it, facility, which is their innovation and heavy transportation building. And my understanding, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, is the Advanced Transportation Technology Center is one of only a few in the U.S., and I think it's the only one on the West Coast.
Yes.
Which is significant because we need this kind of, thank you, John, for confirming that. I don't want to make facts up. LBCC has long been recognized as a leader in developing educational programming for automotive technology, but this focuses around the evolving fuel and energy technologies that are now being utilized by the auto industry. And the creation of this Advanced Transportation Technology Center is one step in many that LBCC began to support the push in the auto industry into these alternative fuels and energy. And they promote and have programs for students to build those new skills that are required to align them with the needs of this evolving technology in the auto industry. So as you know, and I think you hear about all over the state, the electrification of the vehicles and the major trends in the coming years are that there'll be a wide range of different propulsion systems, which not only include the internal combustion variety that we now have, but hybrids and fully electric vehicles, and they'll all be on the road as consumers demand these more, and the auto industry continues to follow that trend. So not only is the auto industry having that trend, but there has to be also an investment in skilled workforce to install and maintain and prepare all the all the new propulsion systems that exist now but will be evolving into the future. So the training at Lynn Benton includes alternative energy in biofuels, electric vehicles, the compressed natural gas systems that are in cars now, propane, hybrid systems, and they learn by doing. There's all kinds of cranes for heavy lifting and labs that they can do this work in. And John, we're partnering with many fleets in Oregon to transform traditional propulsion systems into alternative systems, including Benton County Sheriff's Office, and I'm not sure what system they're going from and to.
Well, what we have is a number of different partners. We've converted, our students converted a good portion of the Benton County Sheriff's Office fleet from strictly gas to a gas and propane. So it primarily burns propane, which is cleaner and much less expensive. And so the cars are fitted with 2 different fuel tanks, and it works out really, really well. The students get the real benefit because they actually learn how to do it, and then through a learn and earn program actually do it so they can go out. We also are converting over 100 vehicles for the city of Portland into compressed natural gas. And again, it makes good business sense, saves money, it's efficient, and it's where things are going in the future.
So the program is extremely popular. The heavy transportation diesel program is full with 72 students, and the other program has, the automotive program is full with 48 students. My understanding from John over these past few years when this building and system got up and moving is everyone is in demand even before they graduate from the program and they have jobs. A lot of the industry partners are sending their folks to these programs, and being that it's the only one regionally and on the West Coast makes it a huge target.
We have a number of, as was mentioned, there are a number of students that are sponsored. Everybody who has a job, who wants a job, gets a job. Some that don't go on to industry, they came from the farm, they go back to the farm. And but everybody who wants a job gets one, and we have industry folks that are coming to make presentations. It's competitive. It's very, very competitive.
In terms of getting the job.
Yeah.
And extremely competitive in getting in.
The aging of the workforce.
So, doing this takes a lot of partners. There's a lot of private sector and public sector partnership. The building itself and the facilities that you need to do this, infrastructure and building is very expensive. This was in true Regional Solutions fashion, a very collaborative funding effort. The highlights include a lot of state investment, $2.3 million. The City of Lebanon contributed about $1.5 million. The Federal Economic Development Administration gave a grant for more than $1 million. LBCC had a voter-approved bond measure for more than $5 million from the residents of both counties, and a large number of in-kind gifts from local industry and businesses. So it's truly a great project. It's preparing us for the future. I thought it would tie in nicely to the transportation priority that Regional Solutions has, but also what your interest might be. And I know that Director Matt Garrett just visited recently to see the new building and all the facilities in there. And you're more than welcome to take a tour. I was really excited when I heard you were going to be in Lebanon. I said, great, we're just going to go tour the building. And then I found out we had 20 minutes. But you're more than welcome while you're here. I know John would be happy to set that up. If you have any questions about that program or anything else, John and I are here. And we'll also be here for lunch. So if you have any questions about Regional Solutions and our other projects, I'm happy to answer those.
So John, you may not know this, but I'm the general manager of Rogue Valley Transportation District down in Medford, and we actually partnered up with Lynn Benton County early on when we replaced our CNG fueling system with Connect Oregon dollars. We actually donated our system to them so that they could start working on CNG, and they converted just recently, I think 2 of our vehicles, or maybe
I think so.
to be CNG vehicles for our field supervisors. This is really important. for Southern Oregon, where we're trying to promote the idea of using renewable natural gas, and also just CNG in general, what we have found is some of the fleet that ODOT owns, it's hard to get that are CNG. And just recently, there was a vehicle that we couldn't get anybody to work on. ODOT couldn't, because there was nobody certified in CNG, and it becomes a problem. So I think that this is the technology, the education that we're doing is so important, because the technology is changing and it's no longer going to be the way we've done business. And so, you know, I applaud what you're doing, because you're thinking innovatively and moving these students forward. And yes, they can get a job right out, because, you know, there's nobody to work on these vehicles. So I just wanted to thank you. We've had a great partnership with you. And
Well, thank you for those kind words. You know, there are workforce is one of the most important things, because everybody's got dirt and everybody's business friendly, but it's about workforce. And besides the students that are going through the traditional 2-year program, we do incumbent worker training. And so if folks want it, we even have space set up in the, we have 75,000 square feet of shop and classroom space that's available. Part of it's, we have an innovation center so folks can come in, rent a space, and we can do a whole fleet training right there for the private sector. But folks really need to have these skills, because if you don't have workforce, you can't make it work. And this is a really a strong dollars and cents. And really, I really want to give a shout out and thank you for opening the door. It really takes a partnership. Both public and private have been hugely involved. You saw the pictures on the wall of the folks that were involved in this. You know, when you have the major trucking firms giving you $200,000 pieces of, that's a Class 8 truck. That's a $200,000 piece. And I like to think that they gave it to us because yours truly is a wonderfully looking guy, and I just want to do that. But it's enlightened self-interest. This is good business and helps keep Oregon industries globally competitive. And it's going to continue to evolve, and we really look forward to continuing to work with all of our partners. We're opening conversations with ODOT on incumbent worker training. And I'd also want to put in the plug that we are, through the National Coalition of Certification Centers, the place in the United States for alternative fuel training, in addition to the regular trainings that we provide. During the summertime, it's not unusual to see large classes of instructors from other community colleges in the United States taking classes here, learning how to do things, and our instructors are out during other times of the year doing instruction in other states and with private industry.
Thank you so much for your efforts and for what you're doing. I think you're right. We can talk about the changeover, but if we can't support it, it won't work. And so I appreciate the commitment to the workforce as well, and for the partnership too. So we will look forward to having lunch together. And if we have other questions, do we have questions for right now? Please. Yes, Commissioner.
Just one question. Given the success of your program and the apparent demand for your graduates, do you have plans to expand the operation?
Capital infrastructure and instructors. You know, we're expanding as quickly as we can, and if anybody would like to make contributions for equipment and you know, trainers, those are called vehicles in our world, trucks, cars, electric vehicles, the more kinds of things we have to work on, the better, and we'll keep moving forward with that.
Well, on that note, wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
Wonderful to see you. Thank you for having us. Next, we will have a discussion with the Lane Act. Ms. Brindle, I will turn it over to you when you're ready.
Good morning.
Please, yes.
Thank you so much for having us. I thought I was. So,
There you
my
go.
apologies.
Now we hear you.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Claire Syret. I'm a city councilor with the City of Eugene. I'm vice chair of the Lane Area Commission on Transportation, subbing for our chair, Mayor Joe Henry of Florence, who could not be here this afternoon. I'm just going to say a few words and then turn things over to Franny. I'm here along with several other members of the ACT who I will give them an opportunity to introduce themselves to you in a moment. We're very pleased to have this time with you to present our biannual report, to discuss the transportation needs of our area, and to answer whatever questions you may have. We've prepared a presentation to provide you with an overview of the Lane Act area to guide our discussion. And I think you'll see the breadth of our county and the work that we have in our act, all the way from the Port of Siuslaw to Safe Routes to School in the Lowell, City of Lowell, and all sorts of things in between. So before we get started, I'll just go down the table and ask folks to introduce themselves to you.
Hi, I'm Patty Giannoni, representing the City of Coburg.
Good morning, Paul Thompson. I represent the Central Lane MPO.
Christine Lundberg, I'm the mayor of Springfield and also.
Oh, if you push it.
Wrong one. Still not on. Here we go. Christine Lundberg, I'm the mayor of Springfield.
George Greer, I'm an at-large member of the ACT and former chair.
I'm Don Norden, a board member of the Lane Transit District.
Jeff Gowing, Mayor of Cottage Grove.
I'm Lawton Elliott DeAngelis. I'm the Springfield Safe Routes to School coordinator and the bike ped interest on the Lane Act.
Good morning, Chair Boehne, members of the commission. It's nice to see you again. Mr. Galloway, he used to be on our Lane Act. And if I'm not mistaken, from the workshop, Commissioner Van Brocklin, are you from U of O? Did you go to school down there?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
I think I made a couple of enemies by mentioning that in that room.
Oh, no, not here.
You know,
so you might see some pictures
just a
today
game.
that is familiar to you. Okay, so here's an outline of our presentation. First, I'd like to provide you with an overview of our Lane Act, both the organization and the region. And then we'll spend a few minutes describing the transportation facilities in our act, highlight plans for our future transportation projects. And then finally, and most importantly, we've allowed some time for questions and answers that you've proposed to us. But before we get started, I did want to mention that we have the biennial report in your package and other documents that were required for the update. And I can have Bill Johnston talk about that now, or we can just leave them in the packet. Or we can address it later. It's your choice.
We would need to take formal action and adopt it, so if it's whatever works best for your presentation.
Okay.
So we could go forward with what you have now,
Okay.
and then we'll do that
Adopt it
at the end. That's
Okay,
fine.
perfect. Great. Okay, so about our Lane Act. So we were established in 2010. We're one of the newer acts. We're the only act that's just one county big because we have a large county. The area encompasses ODOT Region 2, Area 5, of which I am the area manager, Franny Brindle. I didn't introduce myself, the area manager, sorry. I provide staffing assistance, and I sit as a voting member on the Lane Act as well. We have a unique consensus-based decision-making process, which is formally described in the bylaws. And what we mean by consensus is that all members can live with the decision that's made. We have 29 voting members on our act, which is large, but it includes all the 12 incorporated cities within the county, the Central Lane MPO representative, a county commissioner, the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw, Lane Transit District, designated stakeholders for trucking, rail, bicycle and pedestrian, and environmental land use, and then other stakeholders. Here's some facts and figures to kind of describe our area. We have the 4th largest population. It shows actually 3rd The county population is 370,600. We have, are forecasting an increase by 67,000 over the next 20 years, so between 2015 and 2035. Eugene Springfield is the second largest metro area with over 256,000 people. And we have the sixth largest county in terms of land area, 4,554 square miles. We have the second most road miles, 1,436. And one of our unfortunate statistics is that we also are tied with the highest fatalities for county. So we're tied with Multnomah County for fatalities. We'll talk about safety in a minute as a priority. So existing transportation facilities I'd like to spend a few minutes on. We have, as I mentioned before, 1,436 miles of county roads, the second largest in the state. We have 443 miles of state highways. The highest amount of bridges is for the counties, 461 county and state owned. We have 20 covered bridges, which is the most covered bridges west of the Mississippi. We have the Port of Siuslaw in Florence, which is is the oldest port. We have 8 airports. Eugene is the 5th largest in the Pacific Northwest, but we also have the Creswell Municipal Airport, Florence Municipal, Cottage Grove, which is a state-owned facility, Lake Wohlink and Siltcoos Lake seaplane bases, and Oak Ridge State Airport for firefighting, and the McKenzie Bridge Airport, which is basically a takeoff and landing only facility. We also have 4 railroads that operate in Lane County. Eugene is the most important terminal. We have Union Pacific, Portland and Western, Central Oregon and Pacific, and Coos Bay Rail Link. We also have a large transit district with LTD, Lane Transit District, which operates 34 routes in the metro area and services to the outlying area as well. On our bike and ped facilities, we have 80 miles of off-street paths and 140 miles of bike lanes in the metro area. More people ride their bikes to work in Eugene compared to other metro areas. Now we'd like to highlight some of the future transportation projects and plans that have been prepared for our area. So we're happy to say that all our communities have updated transportation system plans, which is very important because we draw from those plans to look for opportunities for investment. We are currently working on transportation system plans in the city of Veneta and Creswell. So within the past 5 years, we've updated most of them. We also have plans involving transit, including the Lane Transit District, Keep Eugene Moving, Eugene Moving Ahead, which determines the future corridor for improvements for either bus rapid transit or frequent transit service. And we're exploring transit feasibility study between Florence and Eugene. And we're also doing a pilot, or we're not operating the pilot, but we're tracking the pilot between Florence and Yachats, and that will close the last link of transit on the coast. There's a 9-month left, I think the 9-month left on that study right now, closing that gap in transit service. And as you can imagine, there's a lot more cost, and I'm sure you've heard from other acts, and needed improvements than there are funding to cover them. Most important, as I mentioned, with our highest fatality numbers, safety has been very important to us and to our act. And so we've been working on some plans. The Eugene Vision Zero plan is getting ready to be adopted. We also have the Lane County Safety Action Plan that was recently partially funded with the NHTSA grant, and Central Lane MPO Safety Action Plan that we're kind of combining efforts on that. We consider safety to be paramount. We have not only the highest number of fatalities, but we have 54% of the fatalities occur in the rural area, twice as high as most other counties, and 39% of those fatalities occur from excessive speed, and 54% from roadway departures. And I wanted to see if Rob wanted to mention anything.
He says no.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to say something about the Vision Zero. It aims at eliminating deaths and life-changing injuries caused by traffic crashes. It was adopted by the Eugene Policy Committee in 2015, and the action plan is currently pending. There's some ODOT actions that are incorporated in the action plans I just wanted to call out for you. One is to work with ODOT on lower speeds in high crash areas, and accompanying speed limit changes with street design changes and increase enforcement when possible. Also to work with ODOT to revise crash reporting standards to better inform data analysis, and to work with the Eugene Police Department to implement new data collection methods. Also to work with ODOT Transportation Safety Division and/or the school districts to increase access to driver education for young drivers. That's also been an action plan of the Transportation Safety Action Plan in the county. I wanted to call out something that was interesting on education, because it's all recognized that safety is about engineering, enforcement, and education. So what Lane County has been working on specifically on the education front is Driver Education Initiative. And they have a grant enabling the Lane Education Service District to hire a new coordinator whose name is Sherry Bandy, who's developing and implementing a new program. So we're excited about that, because driver education was something that was dropped from the school curriculum in most schools, and so they're trying to find a way to add this back in. So I wanted to call that out for your information. Okay. So next, as I mentioned, we have a lot of TSPs and transportation planning efforts that have listed a number of needs. This number, 788 million, comes from kind of our high priority needs list. We have identified a number of routes within the area, in the Eugene-Springfield area, that need additional funding. One at the top is the Beltline. We've got about 350 to 400 million in needs for the Beltline to increase capacity. It is at or over capacity currently. There are improvements on 126 East in the Springfield area. There's been identified a need for improvements at the Coburg interchange of about 25 million, and on and on. And I-5 is looking to expand. We are looking to expand to 3 lanes through to Goshen, although that might not be the highest priority for the act. It is something that's of interest and need for the freight mobility in the future, especially if we're looking at intelligent transportation, that we'd want to have those kinds of routes available for trucks that can platoon through our area. Yes.
Franny, quick question.
Yes.
Is the remaining, the 788, does that include the 80, pretty much of the earmark?
The 79.9 million
Yeah.
for the, it includes the House bill funding that's already been earmarked for us,
So
yes.
that's rolled into that 788?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. It's the 79.9 is the part that's rolled into the House bill money, the green one, the green mark.
I got that. I'm just curious, is it part of the total 788 of remaining needs, or is it
additional needs?
there's an additional?
Yeah. Those are additional needs.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Yes. So the chart shows that 79 million that we've gotten from the House Bill 2017, which the Lane Act greatly appreciates. We're not really directly involved with prioritizing those projects. However, we did have a role in the governor's visioning, where we had the community come out and provide public comment to the governor's office and that committee that looked at transportation needs in the area. Our act was involved in helping get people there. And also when the Joint Transportation Commission did the work prior to that built upon the House Bill 2017. These needs were identified and discussed from a multimodal standpoint. So we were grateful to get what we got out of the earmark money.
I have a quick question. On the 788, is that able to be broken out into areas of need?
We could.
So you can, okay.
Yeah, we could definitely break it down. Yeah, it was kind of a accumulated amount for what we saw were the big congestion areas that we wanted to address.
That'd be helpful, thank you.
Okay, be happy to do that. Okay, so of the House Bill funding and the earmarks, what we received from the House Bill was Oregon 58 passing lanes prior to Oak Ridge, so to the east of Oak Ridge. We received some funding for that to build some additional passing lanes. We have money for the Oregon 126 West between Eugene and Florence to do the environmental study and get our locally preferred alternative for that widening. It funded the jurisdictional transfers, and I understand one of them is going to be discussed today or is on the consent calendar for Highway 99 through the city of Eugene for jurisdictional transfer. And there were other jurisdictional transfers involved. Lane County had a large share of those. And then Lane County itself received $8.2 million in additional funding. Eugene and Springfield, $5.2 million in additional, and small cities, which we have a number of, about $1 million extra. We heard from our ACT that that's not enough, but it helps. Okay, so the remaining needs, as I mentioned on that red bar, I can address some of that now. Beltline improvements, about 350 to 400, as I mentioned before, to widen the highway. 126 East improvements in Springfield is anticipated about $100 million. Coburg Interchange, $23 million. I-5 widening in Goshen, we don't have an estimate completely for that. And also to mention that in the Safe Routes to School grant funding that just occurred, the Lane Act jurisdictions came up with about a $5.5 million of need or requests, and there were 10 million available statewide. So we realize that this is the first funding cycle, but we're looking forward to future cycles for that. So that brings us up to the questions that you had asked. Are there any other comments of anything you want to add to what I presented? Okay, so let's get to the questions that you, oh, go ahead, back.
On the numbers that you had for the remaining needs, has there been a number identified for the bridges that are seismically deficient? Or is that rolled into any of those? Or I'm just curious about that price tag in your area as well.
Okay, so the funding for the Beltline, that's in, those numbers are in for the Beltline in the 126 East, but it does not include all the Fix-It projects, no.
That would be beneficial to know, as well as transit. Thinking of, almost take the investment strategy that we worked on in 2016 for the 2017 bill. And I think what we'd like to see is starting, this is an opportunity to let you know that as we refresh that document now with the funding that we have, what are the remaining needs in the state, agnostic of what we think can actually be, what's politically palatable. What are we looking at as a state around the regions in terms of remaining need? And so that would be transit, safe routes, bridge, et cetera.
Great.
And not like right on the fly right now, but if you, just to help us to know what the needs are as we're sharing that story around the state.
Right. Yeah, and I do know that the seismic bridges were kind of looked at from a statewide perspective. So we do have this seismic report that we can pull out Lane County's part of it, but that's how we're looking at the bridges, the bridge needs.
Please, go right ahead.
So you're right. I did live in Eugene for a number of years, and it's a great city. I think I've lived in 5 different cities in Oregon, and Eugene's district was a great place to live. I'm curious about a couple of things on safety. In Portland, there is this program that has been rolled out called 20 is Plenty, to try and get the speed limit down to 20 in all neighborhoods in the city. And that's been a very visible effort to try and get education up on speed in residential neighborhoods. So I wondered if you had any, if you were having connection with that program and with the City of Portland and their efforts to do similar things to what you mentioned you're trying to do. Just wondering what the intergovernmental cooperation within the state has been on that and how you're going to school maybe on, not just Portland, but in other cities that within or outside the state that are trying to address the same problem.
Well, I would like to let Paul help answer that question because we are still kind of following what the requirements are for traffic speeds, the 80th percentile. However, I do know that we're looking at some flexibility in the future, and there's some legislation that's pending on that I remember hearing about recently.
Well, I can add a few comments, and then I might ask Rob if he has some things to also say about this. The Central Lane MPO safety program that Franny mentioned is housed at the Lane Council of Governments under my program. We are in connection with the City of Portland. We are working very much on speed as an issue, both within the metropolitan area, especially around schools, and then on the rural roads that Franny mentioned. The Metropolitan Area School Program, we've been trying to do a lot of education. We've been putting a lot of signage out at the schools as the school year started a couple of months ago. We've been partnering with the schools around speed reduction. But to speak very frankly, we have, and this is what Franny was referring to, we have had some local experiences where local jurisdictions have tried to reduce speeds on roads adjacent to schools. Coburg is one, and have been unsuccessful in doing that. And so my MPO policy board specifically has endorsed as a priority for the legislative session or whatever venue it can happen through, working on a better, more flexible approach to setting speeds and perhaps more local control on that. I'm also working with all of the Oregon MPOs through the Oregon MPO Consortium that I manage to try and get all the Oregon MPOs behind that, and we tentatively have that. So there's some needs for being able to have more local control and more local autonomy because sometimes they've run into, frankly, state roadblocks in the methodology.
I had a couple of other things. So we recently received a letter from Congressman DeFazio in which he, among other things, mentioned a couple of major upcoming events, the 2020 Summer Olympic track and field trial, and of course the 2021 World Championship track and field meet in Eugene. And of course, I serve on the Oregon Law School Board of Visitors, whatever they call it. So I get down there every so often. And the last time I was down, Hayward Field was gone. And so I'm watching with interest this new facility that's being built. And so that got my mind turning, as well as Congressman DeFazio's letter to how we're doing in terms of being prepared for events like that as Eugene continues to gain notoriety and gets opportunities and is just separate from that, just growing as a metro area. So on your mega projects in the Eugene Springfield area, where are we on those? Are we making progress? Are they getting funded? Are they getting designed and built, or are we falling behind?
That's a very good question. I could start with some answers, and other people can chime in. I definitely think that, we have a current project to try to get some bridges up to seismic standard, and to do some badly needed repairs on a number of, there's 7 bridges that go into town that need to be fixed. The funding seems to be focused on the fix-it side. That's where the infrastructure focus had to be because of trying to keep our facilities as resilient as possible. There hasn't been a lot of funding for enhancements. In fact, that last slide where we talk about the enhancement amount has been that the act had any discretion on has been very small amount of money. So to answer your question, we haven't really seen a lot of funding for those kinds of things. However, the cities have been working really hard to get ready. The Maine McVeigh work in the Springfield side at the end of our old Franklin Boulevard that's going to be transferred in pretty soon in its entirety, has an excellent project that helps with getting people into the city of Springfield. It's a beautiful project. The mayor might want to mention that. We are looking at doing some arts, all roads transportation safety enhancements on Main Street. But you know, to say that we're doing anything really special for the 2021 games, there's not a lot of funding that has come to ODOT to get ready for that.
And I'd also add to my list the night campus, because that obviously is a huge endeavor as well. So,
go ahead. Okay, please.
So I just want to address, you know, a little bit of, you know, where the particularly enhanced funding is, and I can't address necessarily the night campus or all of those, but we're planning an indoor track to match the outdoor track in Springfield. So of course there's more funding needs, but a couple of things, and Franny mentioned the Maine McVeigh because it has been one of a big crash area and we have lost lives. So working with ODOT now, we're working very hard. I'm very happy with the work that started to try and enhance along that. We did get a speed reduction, so I'm very happy about that too. One of the things that we're looking at Monday is we do have a bike ped project, and this is one of the things that I think a lot of us are going to run into is the ADA requirements for ramps, and it's made a significant, taken a significant bite out of the project in terms of, okay, now we can't do the whole project. We have to do it in phases. And so I think as we go forward, and I know that the state is dealing with how do we do all of these ramps all over the state. So just as another consideration for how far the dollars go is we have to take into consideration the requirements that we now have to upgrade all of our ramps at the ends of blocks, et cetera. So I think that will be an issue. It's, you know, it's just in terms of how much money we have to spend on a project when we have money.
Just wanted to mention that the Lane Transit District is also involved in projects. There's the Franklin Avenue, where right now the buses can only go one way at a time. That's going to be expanded so that they can go both ways. We're also very involved in the Transit Tomorrow operational analysis that's going to change the way transit is delivered in Eugene, but we're out right now asking the community what they really want in terms of how that's going to be delivered. We're also going to be instituting a mobility on demand pilot project in Cottage Grove, which one of the exurb communities of the Eugene Springfield area. That will be a good indication of how transit can develop in the future in providing mobility services. Mobility as a service is the buzzword we're using these days, but and that's going to launch in January. So we should get some information by next summer about how that's working.
And George?
First, I'd like to thank Chair Boehne for taking the time yesterday to meet with us on site with the I-105 bridge project that Congressman DeFazio alluded to in his letter. And one of the lessons out of that meeting, I think, is that that's a critical pathway in and out, commute pathway, and the backup of traffic in that area has pretty much created gridlock throughout the whole community, which I don't think anyone anticipated. But what it does show is that our system is pretty much close to capacity. East-west travel is severely limited, and these remaining needs projects visualize addressing some of those long-term issues, but they are so far out in terms of actually finding a solution or being funded that our community is going to have to wrestle with some serious issues. And, one of the things we discussed yesterday is we can't have a whole lot more cars on the road and not expect some more problems. So we're going to have to find ways to get cars off the road. I think that's one of the visions for planning for the special events is having a much more robust multimodal kind of system in place locally. But thank you for the question.
I would just, that last comment, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, one of the conclusions that you just inevitably come to in congestion, areas where there is congestion, like Eugene, Springfield, like Medford, like Bend, is the single occupancy vehicle is not your friend in terms of trying to solve that. And yet people have to have choice, and they have needs to be in their vehicles for various reasons, but we just need to be relentless on multimodal as a state. It's not just a Portland thing or a Eugene thing. It's happening all over the state, and another, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are going to move here in the coming years, and we just have to get at it somehow. The improvements we need to make to really give people viable choices to get out of their SOVs.
Yeah, so I really appreciate George's comments, and I will just add, the City of Eugene has adopted a climate recovery ordinance, and one of the mandates in there is for us to reach the goals that we've set there is to triple the number of trips taken by bike in our community, just for one example. So we are very motivated to look for ways to provide alternatives to the single occupancy vehicle in our community, and not only with reducing congestion, but also trying to meet the goals around carbon emissions and climate recovery.
I'm going to just two quick responses directly to your question. First, I've managed the MPO's long-range plan and list of needs for 30 years now, and we're falling behind on the funding for the large projects. I think you asked that question. We've had some successes, but as this shows, and as I think has happened at the federal level since the Stimulus Act back in 2008, we've fallen behind and have not been keeping up with the needs on the large projects, the mega projects that you asked about. The second thing, with respect to the 2020 trials, 2021 games, I've repeatedly heard from my policy board that we recognize there's not going to be I-5 corridor permanent improvements before that, and they're really hoping for additional Amtrak runs, additional public or mass transit of some form along that corridor during those events.
I am going to say one more thing, because your comment really, because I just want to keep saying this in all these meetings, that federal government has got to get back into the capital game on transportation in a big way. The country needs the federal government. I'm not singling out any, certainly not singling out Representative DeFazio on this broad statement, but I was involved in it when I worked in government in Oregon 30 years ago, and we had a lot of help from the federal government, and a lot of the system we have in place is because the federal government played a major role in funding it, building it, not maintaining it, although there's federal funding for that too, but building it. And they're just not there at the level we need them to be there, and we need them back as a partner. And so we all need to work on encouraging our elected officials at all levels of government to continually make that point. They cannot sit it out. They're not completely sitting it out. They can't be playing at the level they're playing at and get at all of this stuff that needs to be done in the United States.
So with the remaining JTA money that we had left over from the Beltline I-5 interchange, with the money that we're getting from House Bill 2017, and for a past federal earmark that we had at Coburg, We are getting ready. We're really close for federal funding. We've gotten the NEPA taken care of so that we could purchase right away and start those designs for those two, the Beltline and the 126 West. And for the Coburg interchange, we've used the earmark funding to do some protective right-of-way purchase and to also do some preliminary design. So we've done what we could with the small amount of money that we've had to get ready for that. When the funding is there, we can pull the trigger. And that was work we've done with this act and with our partners.
So I want to switch to safety. Our Transportation Commission, obviously, our first priority is safety. And I want to go back to the slide where you are tied for first in terms of fatalities. And you noted that 54% of those are in the rural areas, and we're seeing that across in other areas. Well, the rural parts of our state are struggling. As we look at the ease, the engineering, education, and enforcement, one of the challenges that we've noted is the enforcement piece in being able to make sure that we can reduce the speeds, we can do all the things that we can, design, whatever it is. But that behavior of the individual is something that both the distracted driving and the speeding is more on the enforcement side. So I don't know if anyone wants to touch. I will let you know that we have met with Superintendent Hampton from OSP. We do know that in the outlying rural areas that is a challenge. We have recognized that the enforcement piece, both from a work zone safety perspective as well as traveling public throughout our communities, there is city, county, and state enforcement that we all need to be looking at in terms of investment. So where is the enforcement discussion on the documents that you noted? Was that something that also from a city and county perspective is being influencing additional investment, and how is enforcement being addressed in terms of fatalities in your area? Rob, great to see you.
Great to see you, Chair Boehne. Let me try this. I wish somebody from Lane County were here. Lane County is doing really amazing work in response to the bad statistic. They have something called the Fatal Crash Investigation Team, which is a multimodal team of engineers, law enforcement officials, judges. I'm probably missing somebody, but now after every fatal crash in Lane County, the team goes out and tries to understand what happens, what can we learn from that, what can we do to prevent it. Lane County, I believe, is the second county in Oregon that's adopted towards 0 deaths after Clackamas County is doing good work. But the enforcement issue, I think the statistic is that Lane County has more road miles than other county in Oregon and has essentially no enforcement whatsoever. There's just no sheriff's budget to do that. So you drive around and you will never see a sheriff. People drive too fast. There's only so much that education can do if you don't have enforcement. They're doing some things with engineering. Road departures are a major issue, and adding treatments on the sides of roads help alert people when they're leaving the road. But we do not have the money for enforcement in the county. I will add, the city of Eugene is, I think, the second city of Oregon that's adopted Vision Zero after Portland, and are doing some great work. But I and the Public Works Director met with new Police Chief Chris Skinner, and we said, can you enforce the laws? Can you, like, people run red lights, not speed? And he was quite clear and said, I do not have the budget right now just to do my basic job of public safety, and the City Council has provided more money, and I think that that's just to bring up sort of minimum level. So there's just not the funding to do law enforcement in the urban areas or in rural areas.
Here's an interesting anecdote, a follow-up to your question, which was that when we had a presentation on safety and this enforcement issue came up, there was a comment by law enforcement that one of the most deadly stretches of highway in Lane County is between Eugene and Florence. And that they had actually, because of the road design, there are very limited opportunities to actually enforce speed limits there because they didn't have a place to pull anyone over. And that's just a flaw in the road design.
So prior to sitting on the commission, I was actually on the statewide safety committee, and I applaud you for your transportation action plan and looking at it you're right. And looking at the statistics from the performance of the last, I think it was 2016 is where they looked at the performance the last time. In your region, motorcyclists are one of your highest fatalities. And so that's a real clue to some of the accidents that are happening are younger men that are on motorcycles. But the good news was that your fatalities in pedestrian and younger driver and bicyclist was way down. So you're doing something right with your plan. I think that's, and what you're doing with your programs. Drug and alcohol was also down, but what is up is roadway departures due to motorcyclists and distracted driving. So I think one of the things that I became aware of is there's 77 open spots on the Oregon State Police right now that have not filled. That just tells us as a state that we're not doing what we need to do. I drive the corridor from Medford to Salem all the time, and it's very rare that I even see a trooper. So, you know, the state has a lot of work to do, and you're right with the sheriffs not having the funding available. You know, we can lower the speeds, but if nobody's out there enforcing it, they're just gonna continue doing what they're doing. So I applaud you for having that safety action plan out there and just keep up the good work, because it is important.
And I just wanted to add a couple of comments. So several years ago, I was reading through a report, a survey of an affordable housing complex off of Highway 99, where the residents identified safety as a major concern of theirs. And at first glance, you might think that would be safety around criminal activity or being victimized, but actually what they meant was traffic safety for their children to be able to cross the street and play nearby in the neighborhood. So I think that's an important insight for us, especially as an elected official, to have. And then in regards to the Eugene Police Department, our new chief is really working hard to bring us to a fully staffed status for the first time in several years, and he anticipates us being fully staffed in the sense that all vacancies are filled with early next year. Now, whether or not that means he'll have the opportunity to dedicate some of those resources towards traffic enforcement is a separate question. So,
and if I can add two more. The county's not here, but I do know, again, my policy board has put automated enforcement, both urban or metropolitan and rural, as an issue that they'd like to see more energy around, more funding, more flexibility around. And I have personally heard from Lane County staff multiple times that they would like to be able to use rural automated enforcement. On the enforcement side, the other thing that sometimes is missed is that it's not just the first touch point for enforcement, but it's the DA. The investigation and prosecution is underfunded and often just goes by the wayside. So there may be a stop, but it's never followed up on. I've personally heard from the DA that, for instance, and this is just one example, they can't get to bars quick enough to get the video to see if somebody was served too many drinks, because the bar's videos are on loops, and by the time they get there, they're erased or recorded over. The Lane County Public Safety Coordinating Council has that funding, that enforcement at the DA level as a priority.
That's
So
great to hear.
And I will mention that the enforcement community have been involved with all of these plans. So that's how we know this information about what their capabilities and what their lacks are.
Wonderful. Well, we are assisting our sister agency of OSP in helping them share the story about the importance of enforcement and our being able to, keep our communities safe. So we will continue to be supportive of where we can in your communities too. I think at this point, we will be having a similar discussion over lunch of the questions that we had asked. So I think instead of going through those in the formality that we had kind of identified, I might just ask the commission if you have any changes or thoughts or comments on the biennial report, or if you had things that you wanted us to know, Ms. Brindle, before we moved forward with that. We do have a copy of it and have reviewed it, so if there isn't anything in particular that you wanted to note.
The only real change from the last one is that now we have alternates for our stakeholder positions, where we did not have before, and that we have a draft work plan We had not adopted it yet because we were still getting some clarification about our roles post House Bill 2017 and how we may best work together with the OTC.
Wonderful, and that's the conversation that we want to have over lunch, is making sure that we continue to develop this relationship. Your work is critical to our success in being able to set policy. We can't do that alone, and so we need to make sure that we know what your priorities are and how we can best serve. So we'll have that conversation over lunch. Great. Please.
Unless there's further comment, I was going to make a motion.
Wonderful.
So I'd move approval of the Lane Act biennial report.
Excellent. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. All right, so we will, I know we are a little behind, so shall we come back at 1? What would you prefer, Director Garrett? Shorten the lunch? $12:45? 12:45 sounds great. So we will recess till 12:45. Okay, so I'm going to make an executive decision and